So welcome again. My name is Alan Lee. Welcome to the 10th Resiliency Dialogue Workshop of ProTech. I'm the Community Engagement Committee Chair for the Project ProTech. And we are very excited to have a very vibrant, energetic panel today from our youth to talk about issues of racism and other oppressions that impact them and their resiliency response. So I would like to invite our community engagement coordinator, Rain, to host this evening.
Hi everyone, so I'm Rain here, and we will start this evening. I'll introduce all the panelists in a bit, but why don't we start this evening with just to see who is here right now. We have a short poll that we'll launch in a second, just to see what kinds of people are here. Also, just so you know, if you want to talk in the chat, you are welcome to click in the chat. There's a drop-down menu. If you check mark all panelists and attendees, that way everyone can see your question or comment. Or if you just have a question to one of us, you can type that as well.
Keep the host first before we can do the poll.
So okay. So yeah, so go ahead and I will give you a moment and I will just set some few things. Yeah, so like I was saying, if you want to make any questions, ask any questions or comments, you can click on the drop-down menu in the chat and just click all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see your comment. Yeah, and then so as we let you finish the polls, we can go into acknowledging our territory here. We are on the sacred lands here. So as the slides come on, we are honored here with respect and gratitude to acknowledge that we are gathered on the sacred land covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Toronto is located on the Dish with One Spoon territory, a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississauga, and Haudenosaunee that bounds them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and all newcomers are invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect to share and care for the resources of this land. We are aware of the ongoing impact of colonialism, racism, and other forms of discrimination and social injustices that disproportionately impacts Indigenous people here on Turtle Island. We are standing in solidarity to continue our fight against anti-Indigenous, anti-Black, anti-Asian, Islamophobia, and any other forms of racism and social oppression and discrimination locally and globally. So as we move on to the next slides, we also just want to remind you that we want to make sure that we're here to respect everybody, and your mics are muted. You can definitely let us know if you want to ask a question. We can definitely, if you want to speak, we can definitely unmute you. And you can raise your hand if you want to, speak. You can also, ask questions. As I mentioned, click on the panelists and attendees. And when you are speaking, just make sure that there's not a huge amount of background noises, and try not to take screenshots of our conversation here. This conversation will be recorded and shown later on our YouTube channel, so you can always come back and look through it. And just remember to be courteous and respectful to other participants. And so we have invited 3 guests today here. We've got Coly, Kishuan from Scarborough Youth United, which they will talk a bit about their work later. And right now we would also like to introduce Joyce Chu, who is from Hong Kong. And Joyce can talk a little bit more about the work that she does. So the mic's all on you, Joyce.
Thanks, Rain, and thanks, Pratek, for inviting me to be here today. Hi, everyone. My name is Joyce, and I am a youth program worker at Hong Kong Mental Health Association. We are a community agency that works with East Asian communities on their mental health journey. So we provide clinical services, including case management and group psychotherapy, peer support groups, and family support groups. My team, which is a youth and family team, as the name suggests, works with youth and their parents by providing counseling support, outreach and engagement, psychoeducational workshops for youth and parents, programs, and peer support groups. Just to give you a little bit of background, our team's programs and services are rooted in 4 R's. So when we're having a discussion today and kind of where I'm coming from are these things, which is the first one is resilience-based. So we work to develop youth and families' capacities to face, overcome, and grow from life's challenges and to be able to bounce back from them. 2 is resource-oriented. So we support youth and families to identify strengths that promote well-being and growth. The 3rd one is relationship-centered. So we want to strengthen relationships within and between youth, their peers, their parents, and their communities. And then the last R is to raise awareness. So we promote mental health awareness and help-seeking behaviors. My role as a youth program worker is to develop, deliver, and evaluate programs for youth 12 to 17 in Toronto and York region in ways that will build their resilience and strengthen their social connections. Based on an early intervention and prevention model, the programs that I run focus on life skills practice, social identity, exploration and understanding, and youth leadership. And I believe that there's going to be a case study that we'll be sharing today, and I do want to spend some time to talk about it. Yeah. So if we can put that up on the screen, and we can take a bit of time to look it over. I think those are the poll questions. Is there there you go. So so this case that we're talking about is an 18-year-old youth who shares that they're feeling lonely, isolated, and tired. They're having difficulty sleeping and staying asleep. They only get 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night. They wake up tired. The youth perceives mother to be highly critical. They're always pointing out improvements and mistakes. The youth doesn't feel comfortable sharing real feelings with parents. The last time they shared about their experiences of having panic attacks, the parent indicated, "Oh yes, I used to feel that way too. That will pass, don't worry." The youth doesn't feel like they can have any conversation or real interactions with the mom at home. The dad used to work in the office, but since March of last year, he stays at home all the time to work remotely. The mom doesn't work and she stays at home. The youth is in school virtually and has been since September by choice. They haven't left the house in 2 months. The youth stays in touch with friends and peers through text, but they'll never video chat or phone call. Their friends are a good source of emotional support. And yeah, they live at home with their parents. So we assume that there's 3 of them in the home with them. So the case study that I shared is a common situation that many families are facing right now. A general trend that we're noticing in the youth and parents that we work with is that youth are isolated. They're feeling the added stress of virtual school and all of its challenges and studying alone and learning by yourself and feeling a loss of routine. So with parents, they're also dealing with their own share of challenges and stresses, as people, as everyone is. But now that everyone is at home all the time, everyone has to navigate and figure out how to like be together 24/7. And as we discuss this case study, I do want to mention like this is meant to start a discussion and open up space for ideas and sharing. There's no singular solution as we're all trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work in this very new landscape of support. We're not here to blame or to judge anyone. We're here to be a part of a conversation and how to move forward, and would love to hear from the panelists and also the audience as well. Yeah, so I guess we can start off with the poll questions, and then we can go through each one and kind of share some ideas.
Great. So it seems like most people have answered. Do we want
Should
to
I
discuss the poll, the case?
Cool, awesome, this is great. Yeah, so the first question is how does the home situation impact the youth? So they don't have any real interactions with mom. Everyone spends all the time together. The youth doesn't share real feelings to parents. The youth stays in touch with friends through text, and they indicate that they're bored all the time. And so when we're talking about this case study, there's this 18-year-old who's not only experiencing like isolation and loneliness and difficulty sleeping. One of the huge things is that there's tension between with the relationship with the parents. Right now, in the case study, we know that the youth feels like the mom is highly critical, always pointing out like what are their mistakes and not invalidating their experiences of panic attacks. And so they kind of brush off the things that the youth shares. And so maybe like we don't know what is happening with the youth, but that kind of causes a wedge between them where the youth doesn't feel like they can talk to the parents because it's not a safe space to talk. So why share anything? And so that's kind of where we're at. Like the answer is kind of like all of the above. The thing with like mental health and like, resilience and all that stuff, it kind of works with all different facets. There's not just like one single thing that impacts our mental health, but more so, our surroundings, the people around us, our communities, our own health, especially our families now that we are at home all the time. So our housing situation, all that stuff. And so, yeah, the impact is actually all of them. The one thing that we can take away is that the youth feels like they can still talk to their friends. So they are keeping in touch with them, even though it's just through text, but there is someone that they're reaching out to. And for someone who knows about this case, I'm assuming they reached out to a counselor or someone who knows about this case study, hopefully. The second question, I'm not sure if we can, I guess we don't need to know like the percentage of results. So we want to know from the parent's point of view, right? How does the home situation impact the parents? You know, the dad is at home all the time, whereas it used to be like at least he would, you know, go out and have space for the mom, let's say, or even with the youth. Again, they spend 24/7 together. The youth doesn't talk to the dad either. And they don't share real feelings. So the reason why our youth team is called Youth and Family Program, rather than just focusing on youth, is because we recognize that family has a huge impact on youth well-being and development. In many nuanced and subtle ways, youth learn about who they are, their values, and how to see the world through their parents' eyes. So that's why we have a strong focus on supporting parents of caregivers and supporting their mental health and awareness. In this case study, we don't actually hear from the parents' point of view of how, you know, they're being impacted and how the home situation is like impacting them. I would say for me, the answer would actually be all of the above. And yeah, even though we don't hear from parents and how they're feeling in the current situation, we can speculate. So it's possible that they're also feeling lonely, they're feeling tired, they might be having trouble sleeping. They might feel isolated from their friends because no one gets to see anyone these days. We know that the youth doesn't interact with mom and dad. So actually, you know, they have one less person to talk to. They can only really talk to each other. But how do they feel about it? How do they feel about this relationship and attention? Are they frustrated? How do they interpret this space and the disengagement from the youth? Are they concerned? Are they stressed about the future? When talking to parents, most of the time, it's most likely all of those things. You know, they have their own stresses, they have their own worries, and how to deal with tensions. And there's a disconnect in, you know, the relationship, and they don't know how to bring it back together. What we find most often is that, you know, both youth and parents want the same thing, but because things like generational gap, cultural differences and expectations, language barriers, parenting style, like how the parent was parented, things get really fuzzy really easily. Most of the parents that we talk to, they're so focused on supporting their kids and being that, you know, caregiver role, that they forget that they themselves require self-care and check-ins to make sure that they're doing okay, and like how they're bringing themselves into the relationship. The phrase like "you can't pour from an empty cup" comes to mind. It's great that parents are putting everything they can to take care of their families, but they can also lose track of their own mental health, and they might not realize that they're burnt out. So we'll talk a little bit more in a little bit, I guess, like with how we can support all of these ideas. But in the third question, I'm not sure if we can share the screen again. We asked what supports would be helpful for the youth. And this is kind of where we kind of dig deeper into what the situation is, how to move forward, and where the discussion also really happens. And this question is a bit tricky because all 5 strategies are good starting points and would target some of the challenges that the youth is facing. So there's no wrong answer for this one specifically. But the tricky part is to know where to start. It would be great if we can get youth to get all the different supports all at once to start the recovery process, but it rarely works like that. Building up mental health and resilience is a slow and gradual process, and it takes a lot of commitment, and it won't change overnight. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind is knowing that the support and love will be there, but not expecting them to like be ready for it within a day. So I guess like as caregivers, as parents, as service providers, when we're suggesting supports and resources, it's important to keep the youth's readiness in mind. We want to make sure that they're ready to engage, that they're willing to go through it. And the 5 different strategies are just common starting points, but entry ways, but they're not the only ways. So you have to give space to listen to the youth, and ask them what they want to do. During that process, we have to keep in mind their strengths, right? They've overcome a lot already, and they probably have a lot of skills already embedded in what they're able to do. But they just need a little bit of support, they need guidance, and a little bit of confidence. So I do want to talk more within each one because it's very varying ways of going about each one too. So finding ways to have face-to-face time with friends. So I'm assuming for us, like we want to support youth. How can we facilitate conversation with a real person, right? Someone with a face. When I run program, most of my youth, they just share a black screen. They just disable their camera, and it takes a little bit of convincing for them to get used to just like seeing themselves on the camera, being comfortable sharing that with other people. So it does take a bit of time normalizing the idea that you're going to see your face when you see other people as well. For younger youth, it may be easier for parents to help coordinate some sort of like face-to-face time with their friends that they used to hang out with, or it can be arranging like a drop-by into a friend's house, just wave from the car or like from the end of the driveway to like the driveway on the other end, just like to see someone, right? Just to talk to someone, I think would make a huge difference. The second strategy could be to find safe ways to talk to parents. And again, like this takes work on both sides. So youth probably feels really hurt by the parents' actions and they could be reluctant. And it's important for parents to demonstrate that they're ready to listen and accept what the youth are telling them. And again, this is not easy either, but sometimes youth just want someone to listen to and be understood. It gives me that space to kind of vent and talk about it, because otherwise they're just in their own thoughts all the time. The parent talk is important. So talk being a strengths-based framework is really important, like to communicate that we believe in the youth, or like the parents believe in the youth. And how can parents, put aside their own biases and past childhood experiences to really be present for the situation at hand. The third scenario is to join recreational programs. So it's just whether it's like games related, specific hobbies, or it's like educational workshops, any kind of like, or webinars. It's a great way to meet others and talk to other people. And it's kind of like a low risk situation because you're in a group. So it might be less intimidating for some youth, and it's in the premise of having fun playing games. And it's relaxing, right? After a whole day of virtual school. Seeing a counselor, and this is where the readiness really is important. There could be stigma, there could be barriers to services, even finding the right counselor could be, all of these things, like, I guess, barriers to kind of go through. But finding someone to talk to can be really helpful for the youth to talk about their struggles or set goals for themselves, just to have someone kind of structure conversation a little bit. And if the youth isn't ready, there are youth outreach workers. So Hong Kong has one, and he acts as a bridge to other services. There's not the stigma of like counseling and like mental illness, but it's someone who really focuses on engaging the youth and providing more referrals to like other services and other programs. And for youth who are not ready to see a counselor or to do other things, it's more like informal, more chill, then someone like that would be great. And encouraging parents to see a counselor would be the fifth strategy. And again, parents hold their own challenges, and it could be beneficial for them to find someone to talk about their own challenges. And one really important thing is finding a cultural competent service that addresses the ways in which their culture impacts parenting style. I think like the ethnocentric way of parenting is not necessarily the same as like, for me, like Chinese parenting. It's like, where do those clashes come in? And how does that impact their view of parenting and how it plays out? So we can also, create a new routine for youth. I think that's one thing that it's not in a strategy, but just things to keep in mind. So youth have lost all agency in their actions. So it can feel a little bit helpless because they don't get to see their friends. They have to physical distance, they wear masks. There's so many new policies changing all the time. So and like it's hard to keep up, and they have no say in any of this, right? Even they can't go outside, even school, they had a choice, and now no one goes to school. And it can be easy to feel like they have no control over their lives. So even having a little bit of say and agency in the household can be very beneficial, kind of bring that back to them and have them participate and be involved in the household structure, right? It can be setting a break time for everyone, or like a set schedule for everyone to spend time together, or something like that, that they kind of call the shots on. The last thing I do want to talk about is, I guess, the sense of community. We have a lot of youth who are doing self-referrals this pandemic, and it's kind of a spike in what we've seen before, whereas it used to be, you know, from school staff, social workers, and parents. And we still get a lot of those. And the support and partnerships from the community is a huge factor in our successes when working and supporting youth. And it's a collaborative effort, right? It takes a village. I guess the main takeaway from this case study and this post question is for, you know, caregivers, parents, families, service providers to remember that you're not alone in supporting youth, and it's as a community that we lean on each other to provide the support and be there for youth.
Wow, thank you for sharing that with us and having that that valuable insight. Does Coly and Kishuan want to say anything to that case as well?
Yeah, like I think one thing that resonated with me was about kids being shy to turn on their cameras. When we had a summer camp at the SYU, that was one of our problems. The children were too shy to turn on their cameras, and um, even in school, like with my professor, he made this comment that I think really helped me to understand their situation. But he said that if you can turn on your camera when you want to talk to me, because it brings back the humanity in the education, and you know, having that one-on-one interaction with somebody can make a big difference. And that's why I always try to turn on my camera every time I'm in class and stuff like that. Just the look of the smile on the professor's face whenever they see somebody's face is all that's worth it, I think.
I think that's a good point about humanity. It's so different to like talk to a face rather than like a black screen. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard to get them to turn it on. It just takes one person, and it's kind of like a snowball effect. They start getting used to it.
I think that speaks about the community you were talking about, and like being able to establish communities where it's like if someone turns on the camera, someone else feels like they're safe and comfortable to do so too. But I think listening to what you shared, Joyce, like I think when Kishuan and I share our case, there's going to be a lot of similarities, and I think that just speaks to how common a lot of these issues that youth are experiencing are, and particularly like amount of issues. It's not like one thing. There's so many things that are impacting their lives at this moment and what they're experiencing, but also what their families are experiencing. But yeah, like we'll touch about it. We'll touch upon it later when we present our case as well. But really, it's like also that how do we have mental health and well-being supports that encompass their whole humanity and all parts of them, so including what is culturally relevant to them.
Yeah, those are actually, yeah, I was just thinking about how there are so many youth right now that can be struggling like with the mental health, and then, you know, being at home. I mean, if some youth, when they're with their parents and they have a really great relationship, that can be wonderful. And but I'm just also wondering about all those youth that don't, or that struggle with their relationships with their parents. If anybody in the audience wants to share comments or questions, you're welcome to type that into the chat box, or you can raise your hand and let us know. So I'm also curious to know, Joyce, at Hong Kong with the youth, I know there's various youth programs. How have you found it different before the pandemic versus now in terms of like the numbers that are coming in and then the specific needs that they might be asking for?
I think if we're comparing like pre and post COVID, one very good thing that has happened is actually going virtual allows us to reach more youth. So a lot of the youth, if they have to come to the space, they have to wait for parents to drive them. It's always very chaotic. It's always in the evening, right? So it's like either during rush hour or after dinner. So there's like less stress and there's less barriers to service because they can just sign on onto their camera or like their computer, and it's great. So in terms of like recruitment and even engagement, those who come, they stay for a long time. So I have youth who have come to programs like again and again because it's a great way to talk to people and stuff like that. But I guess on the flip side of that is that if the youth isn't ready, it's so easy to not click on a link. It's so easy not to join because your parents can't force you because your parents are going to stay in the room. They can't like bring you there. There's no, so that's the hard part where how do we reach those youth who are not ready to engage the same way that, the people who are self-referring. And that's where more work comes into like engagement and making more of those one-on-one relationships before they're even ready to join a bigger group and to meet other people. Because sometimes they just kind of need someone to talk to. But again, different for each person. But yeah, I think that's like the biggest change is just different reach for youth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Does anyone else have anything else to add to that or share or question? Okay, so maybe we can go into what Coly and Kishuan have been doing. This is the second time we're inviting them in. So there's a lot more we can talk about again and go deeper into some of these cases. Either one of you want to start? And you can introduce yourself again, just for those that haven't heard our previous session.
Yeah, sure. So, my name is Kishan. I use he, him pronouns. You can call me Kish. I work for Scarborough Youth United as a facilitator and a coordinator. I've done workshops teaching Python to students so that they can learn programming. We've done gender workshops. I participated in their youth summer camp, which was a lot of fun. And currently, I'm doing a needs assessment survey with our advocacy team to gauge community needs in high school students. I'll let Coly introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Coly, and so I get to work alongside Kishan at Scarborough Youth United. This is something that I do on top of my own professional and personal work. I do a lot of research, writing, and facilitation on race, migration, gender, sexuality, and media. And I do a lot of that work within community or post-secondary sectors, but being alongside youth has really been really important for me to stay connected. And also, I also want to acknowledge that I'm actually currently calling from Vancouver, which is the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. COVID has actually allowed me to connect with youth back home, which is Scarborough, where I have lived and grew up. And so that has allowed me to stay connected and work alongside youth in my home.
Yeah, so I can give a little background to what SYU does. So Scarborough Youth United's goal is to enable youth to realize their power and potential. We are a grassroots group creating space for working class Southeast and East Asian youth to find strength in our own lived experiences, share our concerns, and work collectively to address those concerns. While our focus is to support and empower Southeast and East Asian youth, we welcome other working class and or racialized youth from other communities. We're committed to striving for accessible and culturally relevant ways to address concerns, understanding our connectedness to issues within and outside our communities, and engaging in intergenerational learning and following Indigenous leadership as respectful guests on Dish with One Spoon territory, which is the land where Scarborough is currently situated.
Can we present the case? Okay, so our case is on Stacy. So Stacy is a 12-year-old child who lives in Mississauga with her mother, who works multiple jobs, and a 6-year-old brother who has some health conditions. Their father passed away in China prior to their migration 3 years ago. Her mother is often exhausted because of the multiple jobs, but occasionally takes time to attend church. Her mom learned about a weekly youth program through their settlement worker and signed Stacy up for it. Stacy spends all day in her room now that classes are virtual. She's shy. Her cameras and microphone are always turned off, and she often says that it's because there's background noise or that her room is too messy. For her, meeting people online and in person is difficult, as she's often anxious. For example, one day she went on Omegle, which is a site where you can meet other people. And one stranger started making fun of her, saying she was funny looking with slanted eyes. And since then, she's even more uncomfortable with turning on her camera. She prefers texting and messaging where she can coherently gather her thoughts and say what she needs to say when she wants to say it. Stacy feels depressed but has no ways to express it. She has been uncomfortable with her gender and questions it, but has not had the resources to process that or understand it or talk to others about her confusion and feelings. She thinks that her own true feelings are worthless and she'll never be able to truly feel like herself. She feels disconnected from her mothers and others. She has little initiative to get up in the morning and take care of herself, which makes her mother feel like Stacy is a spoiled, entitled, and rebellious child who expects everything to be handed to her. When asked by a youth program coordinator in the program that her mom signed her up on, when they ask her how she's doing, Stacy often says she's bored, or that one time she also mentioned life is meaningless when she isn't playing video games. So these are some of the poll questions that we came up with. Some of the answers are varying because we wanted to give just a range of perspectives, whether it's from Stacy, from someone external, from her mother. So yeah.
So we'll give people a few seconds to go through the polls and come up with an answer. Obviously, these are, complicated cases and there's no easy answers. And these are just some food for thought, and we can look at what people may consider. And oftentimes it's it's challenging for youth to when they're in that space of like learning to grow up, but then not really feeling like this world has considered them as like an adult, and but they're they're no longer like a kid or a child. Even like developmentally, their brain is like really developing into ways where they can like really have like complicated thoughts and cognition and self-reflect in ways that like a regular adult can. And then of course the body is also going through a lot of changes, hormonal changes. So it can be a really, really tough time for some youth. And at the same time, there's also some very interesting strategies that I find that youth also can develop and come up with in ways that, maybe even some of the other folks haven't thought about, because they come with these fresh eyes and fresh faces and fresh thoughts. So we'll give a couple more seconds for the polls. Remember to scroll down to the last question. There's 3 questions. And so as we can also see, like, it seems like there are some issues, some common issues that youth do face, right, when they're stuck at home. So we can definitely go deeper into that. Any other folks want to finish off with the polls? Give you a couple more seconds. And whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and continue on with the discussions. Okay, so what are your thoughts?
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to see a little bit like the different answers here. Um, so I know that it might seem like a lot of like kind of short to answer these heavy questions. One of the biggest points that we wanted to make with this case scenario is that it can be overwhelming, like even with just the amount of information that was there. You can really see like how much Stacy is going through, from being forced to do online school, um, suffering from depression, having communication problems with her own mom, and having questions about her own gender. Um, we want to show that oftentimes like these come not at a specific time, but like sometimes all together, and it can be so much, especially when you're at such a vulnerable age. And it's really hard to try to navigate this. And with these poll questions, we don't want to try to point fingers and say that Stacy's mom is doing a terrible job. I think um, a lot of times we don't ask for the situations that we're given. I'm sure that Stacy's mom would want to be in a much better situation financially, and she's doing her best to raise 2 children on her own. But we see that there's communication problems that are going on. Stacy doesn't know how to express her own feelings, to really put what she's going through into words. We can see that exploring online, going on Omegle, talking to strangers, there should be a little bit more guidance. And I think like I see a lot of myself in Stacy, and I see a lot of Stacy and other people. Um, with myself, I had a lot of problems like growing up. Um, Not necessarily with COVID since we didn't have it yet, but um, I questioned my gender and I didn't know who to talk to about it. I didn't even learn enough about it in school. It was always very binary that it was well, it's boy and girl, and that's all there is to it. And I didn't have the resources. So one thing that I wanted to do was to try to be that person that I didn't have growing up. Um, and with depression, it was really hard to get up every day. I had to put on a fake smile on my face. um Oftentimes I was told that like I'm going, like other people are going through much harder problems than I am. And I think I had to force myself to grow up, which I think in some ways is unfortunate, but I'm glad that I am who I am today. And I just want to say that youth resiliency can be many things. It doesn't have to be anything major. It's about, knowing yourself and your needs. It's about giving yourself the capacity to rest when you need to and thrive like you have to. Um, One thing that I did was sing. I did a lot of music. I thought that it was a nice escape to the crazy world that I was in, and it really helped me cope with my situation. But growing up, it made me realize that it shouldn't be a way for you to run away from your problems. Um, it should be for you to articulate your feelings and learn how to navigate your own emotions and to um, talk with other people about it. And it's interesting enough, but like engaging in many different hobbies and exploring myself and what I wanted to do with my own life helped me to be more empathetic of others and to see that I'm not alone. We're not alone. And there's so many people that are in such, well, unique situations, but there's a lot of similarities. And it's, finding strength in each other that helps you to be resilient. It's about being a lifelong learner and being adaptable and open to change, remaining humble and being able to take a step back where you see where you might be wrong, and being able to change your opinion giving new information. Resiliency is about knowing your rights and fighting for them, to question the societal norms and oppressive systems, working actively to dismantle a system that was never in your favor, being an active person and finding out why you feel something is not okay. Uh, so yeah, that's what I have so far.
So I think I'll also just add that so I'm currently not a youth anymore, and for me and why I still want to work with Scarborough Youth United is similarly as a youth, I also didn't have these resources or supports to help me navigate some of the experiences that Stacy went through. Like for example, as a child, I was bullied by racist older kids. I saw my family harassed by racist landlords. Um, I also grew up in a single household, single parent household where I was an older child. And so I actually also found myself putting a lot of pressure on myself when my mother put a lot of attention on my younger brother. And this was at no fault of hers, nor of my brother's. And at the same time, also seeing that, for example, in this case, we have a immigrant mother, like for example, like my mother, she wasn't only navigating having to work a lot, take care of two kids on her own, but also she was navigating being a woman and being a Chinese woman. And for example, she was told by some men in the family that she didn't need to learn how to drive. She was told by some of my classmates' parents that, oh, she shouldn't find a husband or find God. And so as a child, I put a lot of pressure on myself to be like the older sister. And so I felt very lost. And so it wasn't only until I was like 20 years old, I was finally able to understand all of these things that, or I still am trying to understand what all these experiences in my life are. And so I think that it's like having people like Kishuan and I who may have been in similar experiences, who grew up in the same area, similar backgrounds, people who understand what they have gone through. Having those types of supports, but also supports of other new friends. And so as Kishan mentions, Scarborough Youth United, we do a lot of different programs and a lot of different activities that focus on trying to address the lived experiences of youth. And so some of those things include having the language and ability to express what they're going through. And so, for example, if they're going through racism, knowing that that was racism. If they're going through understanding their self as their gender, or understanding the relationship with their parents, having other people to talk about these things so that you can make sense of it with others and not just by yourself in your room. So for me, like, it's really important because resilience is about having not only the words, language, but also the means to express yourself. And I think not only in English, I think also being able to express ourselves in our native languages. And so being able to express ourselves in ways that English doesn't allow us to. And having, for example, stories that speak about us that we don't hear. And so, for example, we have like movie clubs where we watch East and Southeast Asian movies, and then we kind of talk about it. Um, and it's, I think throughout SYU, we've heard from a lot of youth that they want to be exposed to a lot of things. They're really interested in to learn a lot of things and to find ways to express themselves, for example, through arts. They want to talk more about mental health. So they are curious, but it's just having someone to ask them if they want to talk about it and for them to talk about it together as a community. And so another thing is resilience is about community. I think this was mentioned before by Joyce. Resilience in communities is not only about connecting with others, but also with elders and the parents and us and their neighbors and other diverse people in the communities. And so what does it mean to be able to connect with other people, meet other people? So we invite guest speakers of different races, different abilities, and different just of different backgrounds to come and speak to it so that we can all hear that we are all going through different things and that eventually we'll all be okay, and that we can all support each other. And then I think some other things that we need to talk about, and I don't have the answers for, is that resilience is really about understanding that not only are youth going through some of the stresses of COVID and the situations and my immigration, but we know that if they turn on the TV or they're on social media, they see things like horrible news about racism. They see things about climate change and that things aren't getting better for them. And so how do we also address these issues that are so big and outside of our own control? And I think most importantly is like resilience for youth as being able to find joy. And so we try to make everything in all of our programs as enjoyable and as fun as possible. And every time I go to programs, like for example, at our monthly movie clubs, they get to talk to me as if I was a youth, and they complain about, like, they're like, oh, why do you ask this question all the time? And it's like, okay, you can ask that, like you can ask it joyfully and you can have fun. And like during the summer camp, it was like one of my favorite moments was during the break, they would play music for each other and it would be so joyful. And so like those are moments of resilience. And so lately I've been reading a book about disability justice, and they say that what you need is what you deserve. And so I think that's also what we want to empower our youth to know, that whatever it is that you need, you deserve that. And we'll collectively work towards to get that.
Wow, that's a really powerful line there. What you need is what you deserve. That I really appreciate that. You know, like a lot of youth, I mean, we come from like a really interesting world, right? Where, you know, in the past we've raised people to believe that you can't have what you need, and the scarcity mentality has us thinking or believing that there's not enough to go around and you can't have what you need. And so I think that's a really radical change to our perspective and our ways of thinking, if we can actually say what you need is what you deserve. Of course, how we go about getting our needs and what strategies we use is going to be an ongoing process. But I think it is important for us to not shame ourselves for having needs, right? Yeah. So I'm just looking over some of the comments. Thank you for sharing. Does anybody want to turn on the mic? Like Richard, I can totally turn on your mic for you if you want to share. Or Cindy, if you want to speak, we can also turn on your mic for you as well too.
I can speak on that. I think I really resonate. growing up, I was the eldest sibling, so I had a lot of responsibility placed on me. Stuff like skipping school to take care of your baby sister, stuff like that. And I was always happy to do it, but I do think that um, it's it's not good if it's too much. And I guess what I did to kind of um have like let my parents know and like understand my situation was just to be firm and say that I have a responsibility to you, to be an elder sibling, and to obey you, but I also have a responsibility to myself and to my education. And I think just being firm and saying that, they took a lot of respect with that, and we worked with ways to like help the situation and ease it on myself and ease it on them at the same time, basically like coming to a compromise.
Hmm. Yeah. And I mean, there are definitely going to be certain issues amongst all youth, and then there are going to be certain issues amongst certain groups, like being Asian, will come with certain issues as well too, on top of all the marginalization that some of us may be feeling. Um, and then I want to, because I'm doing research on trauma right now, like I want to, draw upon the fact that like there are families where there's domestic violence, right? And so, and we know that domestic violence has really affected women, for example, these days when they can't leave their husbands, right? If the husband is the one doing the abusing, I mean, it can go both ways, right? And so it goes the same for youth, right? When the youth are stuck at home with all this domestic violence, and the rage is surging, that things can escalate. And we know that there's a rise in the usage of like mental health services during this pandemic, because so many issues are happening, right? And I know that for example, in my own family, right? Like when like I was told not to talk about what happens in the house, right? Even when there is domestic violence, you can't talk about it because, you're told that don't tell anybody about this, right? So for many, many years, I did not tell anybody about what goes on at home, right? Until I was much older, right? And that can be so toxic and shameful. And so for youth to even find the courage to turn on the camera, right, is one step. And then imagining, those who struggle that much more at home, um, to talk about these things. It's a long journey, right? And then the recovery process also is another long journey too, right? Does anyone else have any other questions or comments?
I think sometimes even that whole thing about not turning on their cameras, um, sometimes it's like that's okay too. It's like if you don't want to turn on, you don't have to. And as like if they still made the effort to show up, like that is one step. That's like we need to recognize even one step of showing up, even if their camera and microphones are off. It's like, wow, you still came. Like, thank you for coming. And I think that's I know someone wrote a comment about how racialized children have to be parents at such a young age as interpreters running errands. And then and on top of these pressures to perform, like when they come onto a Zoom call where they have the pressure to also, not only on a personal life, but in front of others, like turn on your camera, say something. That's like so many stresses. And so like, how do we just celebrate their little or whatever achievements, and also allow them to have joy so that they know that aside from being like, I don't think that we can take away, it's really hard when you're an immigrant child and you want to I don't think you'll ever distance yourself and say that you're not responsible for your family. And we don't want that, because we want them to stay connected to their family. But it's like, we want them to also be able to have fun and be able to enjoy something without added pressures. Yeah.
There's this post that I saw like from 3 years ago, and I saw it again recently. But it said that anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. So if you don't brush your teeth and you see that and you think, okay, well, maybe I'll brush it for 2 minutes today, or you don't feel like finishing an essay or a paper, and rather than not doing it at all, you decide to do it poorly, but at least you have it done. I think that's one step to showing resiliency. Like it's 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 a big step to even just get up and take a shower and get up for work and for school and to attend to all of your responsibilities. And I think even something as small as that is worth celebrating, honestly. And also just like finding joy in the little things. Life is always made up of those small moments, and I think um, allowing yourself to be happy and to feel happy from those things is kind of what makes life worthwhile. Whether it's feeling excited for a new episode to come out for the week, or having your favorite meal for dinner, I think it's worth just being happy about that as well.
Mm. And Richard, did you want to say something?
Yes. Hi, everyone. It's Richard. Just from listening to all the panelists, and thank you for sharing all your personal stories. And from what I wrote in the chat, and also, well, I'm a grown adult right now, but just looking back, yeah, there was a lot of I would say childhood trauma. I was having to take on the responsibility, a lot of the responsibilities. My family ran a restaurant business. I had to practically put on most of the hats of the business at a very young age, and yeah, I mean, it's in a way it's similar story for immigrant children, but then again, they never get to be a child. They never build that healthy emotional resiliency in terms of just being a kid. They kind of have to be forced to grow up and oh yeah, you're so mature for your age, and the comments like that for a child, and they think yeah, it's praise. But then later on in life, and then they have all these sort of emotional regulation, somewhat of yeah, challenging for them to do so. And I mean, from my perspective as well. So I'm just thinking that okay, how can we help children when they perhaps showing sign of maybe they're feeling overwhelmed? Yeah, such as one of the panelists said, they have to do all these things and then have to you know go on camera and be in front of a group of people and sort of put on this in a sense of a facade to be a child again, and show their side. But meanwhile, I think internally they want desperately to help the family, but a lot of the times these sort of responsibilities are beyond a child's emotional capability. So, I mean, if a child's feeling overwhelmed and they express that and can point them towards different resources in terms of yeah, if the parents need an interpreter or translator, and if maybe they it's taking too much of the child's time, and then point them towards those resources. Or even if the parents sometimes emotional health, their stress just trying to pass this down to the children as well. And I mean, and then the children don't realize, okay, mom and dad are stressed, but they think that, okay, there's something wrong with me. There's something I'm causing that, and I'm feeling really shameful because of that. So Yeah, I think I feel like there's more of a dialogue, not to like disconnect the children from their family, but more of like pointing towards okay, perhaps there's a language barrier, there's generational gap, but at the same time, we can tell them, okay, you can't take on all that burden on yourself, because that would be too much for you at this age to take on. But perhaps, I can give you these resources, and you can let your parent know, and also how to set boundaries with them, because I mean, I guess because the parents, they need someone to do all those things, and having a child, and that they can't really, sort of set a boundary, then you kind of just make them do all those things. So yeah, and that's what I wanted to point out. And yeah, thanks for letting me share.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Richard. I believe that you're right, like there are youth out there that feel a lot of this pressure of responsibility, and yeah, and that's an ongoing issue that we need to continue to really show how we can support youth. We had a few more questions as well from the chat box. Somebody has been asking, for example, where can we find effective support spaces for youth in the virtual world, and how to find ways to support some of these youth, right? And of course, that's one reason why we invited Scarborough Youth and Hong Kong with us, because Hong Kong has a youth program for the youth to be doing a lot of really interesting, great stuff, as well as Scarborough Youth that also offers all kinds of services. Yeah, I'll let you two talk more about it if you want to talk about how you offer support for the youth.
I think, of course, like we're here today because we work with youth. So our agencies, I'm sure we do a lot of great work, and we're passionate about supporting the youth. I think when you're asking the questions like how can we have effective support, each case is unique, so it depends on what their need is. I think kind of what we talked about, a lot of it is isolation. It could be, dismantling, unpacking our social identities and how social structures might be impacting our lives, right? The patriarchy, stuff like that. And I think, SYU does great work on that. And there's other programs and services that does that as well, right? When you're talking about like tackling the more broad issues, that kind of bring them back and then make it more digestible and understanding for youth, because they can understand who they are, and then they can navigate and explore their identities, whether it's like a gender thing or like a cultural thing. So different services. I'm connected to some other youth services, and like they all do great work. Everyone's virtual now, so there is that barrier of like having the internet and having devices and stuff like that. But we've all had great experience with like creating a community online. Yeah, even if it's on Discord or stuff like that.
We also use Discord quite a lot.
Yeah, one of the ways that we've bonded within our group and also with other students is we play games of Among Us. Um, in case like not everybody knows what it is, it's basically an online game. You can play it on your computer or you can download it on your phone, and basically it's an interactive game where you all have to communicate with each other, and you're basically astronauts on a spaceship, and there's a secret imposter, and you have to talk with each other to figure it out. And I think it's a really fun way to basically like use as an icebreaker or to get to know people more, and we've used it as a method of bonding with other youth.
Yeah, I think Kishuan, you bring up a good point of like playing as a way of connecting. I think that's always the easiest way to get youth, right? Whether it's like board games or just like hosting a virtual game night. And it goes back to, I guess, what you both have mentioned about like the little joys, like you mentioned is like during the break when they were just playing music for each other. It can be those little moments that we think like are just like great moments, but they actually collectively are like when you collect them all, they actually build up to their resilience and like things to go back to. And Richard, you're talking about, you know, the parenting role that youth have kind of taken on as a young kid. And it's hard to tease away the responsibilities of like the caring for our families and stuff like that. But giving them opportunities to be kids again is so important. So they can kind of like distance them, we kind of break away from like always being the caregiver for the parent or like being the English speaker to translate stuff. Playing Uno, I don't know, kids love Uno, they never get sick of it. But yeah, card games like Among Us, like just give them chances to be kids or even try new games, try new things, and maybe opportunities to fail, but then they realize like, yeah, I failed, but then I'm still here, and then they kind of learn, right? Yeah, you mentioned if you're gonna do it poorly. Yeah, we're probably all gonna fail at one point, but like we learn, that's how we build and give them opportunities to try new things, join programs. Doesn't work the first time, come back next time. Yeah.
And we also want to remember that like youth at this age is a time where because their brains are developing, it's like it's so fresh for them, their first time that they discover that they have all these abilities to do all these wonderful things with their brains. And so you know, games is a really great way of really using that. And also like, you know, depending on the type of youth, right, there are some youth that are exploring their own identity. You know, there are lots of youth exploring their own sexuality and sexual identity and all kinds of reflections. And this is also a time when like it can be a very creative time for youth, right? You know, there are a lot of people where at this time they still embrace, you know, trying new things and being curious about learning new things and trying out different things, right? Very different from some of us who, you know, once we're past a certain age, we forget that, right? And so when we give youth the opportunity to try out as many things as possible, despite all these limitations, whether it's games or creativity, or you know, just reflecting on their own experiences, you know, that stays with them, because years down the road, they're gonna think back, oh, when I was this age, I did this and I did that, and that's important for them, so that they can always remember that they can return back to those moments of creativity or of curiosity or of self-reflection, you know.
I think
Mhm.
also of leadership, like that's something that we also want to focus on, is like allowing them to facilitate for each other sometimes. Like, for example, we have high schoolers who are running needs assessments of the community so they understand each other and themselves, and they get an honorarium at the end of it, where it's like, I think it goes back to Joyce, what she said about agency, or sorry, yeah, Joyce, what you said about agency. And it's like when they have an honorarium, they did something and they have an honorarium, it gives them so much power back. And not only are we helping them build like actual like research skills, leadership, facilitation skills, but they can have like that little bit of what's theirs as well. Yeah, so finding ways to like redistribute funds so that youth actually have that in their hands as well is part of, I think it's so important.
Youth voices, yes, build their capacity so that we can hear from them.
Yeah, and youth are very committed to future, right? To making this world a better place, because this is their world, right? And some of the strongest voices of progressive change come from the youth. So yeah. Do we have any other comments, questions?
I just want to add something. So, you know, yeah, we've been talking like about of a lot of ways in which we can help them build their own resiliency. I also just like to add that um, I think like, yeah, family is one of the most central parts to building resiliency, and also like having your children feel like you're also their friend. I think it's a lot easier for them to open up to others when they feel kind of like their guard can be down. Um, and there's also another thing I'd like to add. Um, it's important to also like be aware of what they're comfortable with and whether they're ready to or not. Like make certain engagements. So resiliency is also understanding when you need to take a rest, and giving yourself that space to kind of, maybe you might want to isolate yourself for a little bit. So it's important to not always force them to engage in social interactions and stuff like that, but like to have them know that like it's always there once they're ready for it.
And yeah, thank you for that. And so we just want to make sure that people get a chance to fill out our final poll here, just so we can get a sense of how people feel about becoming more aware. It seems like quite a few people have expressed that they feel that they are more aware of issues faced by youth during this pandemic, which is really nice to know that you're able to get something out of this session here. Does anyone have any final thoughts or comments or questions?
So that's great. So thank you again for sharing your lived experience and insights with us. It's been a very exciting and stimulating workshop. Once again, I'd like to thank you all on behalf of ProTech, and we wish everyone a wonderful evening. And next week we have our community partner showcase will feature our colleague Amy Lin from the Hustle Free Clinic, which is actually a free clinic for sexually transmitted health issues, as well as sexual health promotion that is free for everybody, regardless of whether you have OHIP or health insurance. So like, and they are very supportive of international students and youth. So that's a good segue from our panel today. So please check out our interview with Amy, and she'll tell you more about what scope of services they provide and how you can access them. And next week, Thursday, we will have a resiliency dialogue with our friends from this Chinese Canadian National Council for Social Justice, where they will talk about their latest anti-racism campaign called Face Race. So please tune in next week and join us again for our resiliency dialogue. Thank you.
So if the panelists can stay behind, but thank you everyone else for joining us.
And good night.